The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are my own or those of my guests, and in no way represent the views of the company or companies that I or we work for. The stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they are told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident. You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast dedicated to the journey and the challenges surrounding the life and career of Aviator Tony, his co-hosts, and his guests. Together, we will explore the many pathways to an aviation profession, the realities of what a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, an airline pilot currently flying for a U.S. legacy airline with 20 years on the flight line. This is episode 70 of Squawk Ident, recorded on the 5th of February, 2021, from Studio 2821 from the 28th floor of the Westin Copley Place Hotel in Boston, Massachusetts. In this episode of Squawk Ident, we will discuss the seesaw effect that has toyed with our ability to keep calm and fly on. With another round of warn letters announced recently at many of the U.S. legacy carriers, the stress levels have started to creep up again with airline aviators. In the WTF segment, we take a look at United CEO's recent comments on making COVID vaccinations a conditional part of employment for its over 13,300 pilots. We explore the Aviation Pioneer Aviator Bessie Coleman. I am also very happy to also welcome back to the show Mr. Tony Zollo from TransGlobal Airlines as he joins us on today's episode. All this and more on this, the 70th episode of the Squawk Ident Podcast. Now that our pre-flight is complete, let's get ready to push off the gate, start up our virtual podcast engines, and get ready for takeoff. Squawk Ident episode 70 is officially underway. Joining us today is a superb aviator and co-host. He is a former international and professional racquetball champion, a member of the 9G Club, an A&P and avionics tech, an RC aircraft commander, a boat skipper, and a commercial drone operator. Currently, he's a 737 pilot for Legacy Airlines. The name we use here on the show is an alias to our employers, a U.S. mainline carrier. From his fortress of isolation, where he's thawing out, where he just returned from a 3-day trip where he battled a nor'easter weather event. From somewhere in Flower Mound, Texas, help me in welcoming back to the show, Mr. Rob D. Rob, how you doing?
I'm doing really good. How you guys doing?
Doing great, man. Doing great. So, you actually did some flying this week. Tell me about it.
I did. I got to go to a town or a state or a city that I haven't been to before, believe it or not. Portland, Maine. I haven't been there. I even lived in New England for, I don't know how many, 15 years, and I never made it up to Maine. And so this was the first time up there. And coincidentally, there was a nor'easter, as we say it, going through the area. So it was pretty wintry up there.
Yeah.
Snow and wind, and temperature's only down to about 28 degrees, but that's different from Texas. We're up in the high 50s, low 60s right now. So
yeah,
I was shivering in my boots for sure.
Did you have to de-ice at all?
Oh yeah. There was plenty of de-icing going on. The next morning we spent the night, so the kickoff flight got out there, and the plane got in pretty late at night. I think it got in about 10:30. And at that time, the storm had pretty much pushed out. So there wasn't any snow accumulation on the plane, but it was pretty obvious that they encountered icing conditions on the approach, because the flaps were left down at 15, which is one of our procedures if we encounter icing on the approach. And when I did the walk around, you know, the nose and the leading edges were all frosted up or iced up. They weren't frosted or iced up. So, yep, we had to get the ice, remove all that ice, and we're on our way back to Charlotte the next morning.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
Rob, I think you have your background image still green screen thing because the pictures behind you are sparkling, and I'm like, that's pretty cool. How is he doing that? I couldn't figure it out.
Looks like Christmas. Oh, no, that's the nor'easter going on up there in the. That's the effect cool. We got going.
I was like Harry Potter at his house, man. The pictures are moving.
I thought it was Ghost House or something.
Yeah, I'm going to try to fix that while we're talking, though.
Well, you had a pretty exciting adventure there, going through some weather and having to go through de-icing procedures. Something that, I was based in Chicago off and on for 13 years. De-icing is absolutely something that I was part of my normal routine, and I wasn't very intimidated by it. But I haven't had to do it in a long time. I think I've de-iced once this season. I've just been lucky, I guess. And so to hear now, when someone I know goes through the de-icing procedures, I'm always impressed. I'm like, oh yeah.
This was my second time. So I've been pretty lucky myself. I've been able to avoid some of the colder climates, at least, some of the storms or having to wake up in a climate that's cold and frosty. So this is only the second time, but they made it really easy to do with the Hot app, that we have on our EFBs. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is such a modern advancement in our procedures from what we used to have at Sandpiper. You had to reference those cards and, find it, keep that card in the book and make sure you have the current card for the year or whatever. Now it's just all in the app. You just click on the app, open it up. It automatically knows what airport you're at, and you just have to enter the nose number, and voila, it does everything for you.
Yeah, so it's pretty amazing. And I'm really happy that Legacy Airlines has developed that technology. And I think that maybe in a future show, we should probably dedicate some time on explaining what de-icing procedures are like when you're working at an airline operator, and how it differs from, say, a private or a charter operator.
It'd be interesting.
Yeah. Speaking of private operators, also here to help me to get Flight 70 of the Squawk Ident Podcast underway today is another exceptional aviator and co-host. He is an award-winning trophy-hoisting tennis champion, a professional CFI IIMEI flight instructor, a former freight dog, a former airline pilot, a current King Air flight instructor, a Falcon 2000 commander, a captain, and a corporate operator as well. He joins us from his chateau, where he just got back from a 3-day event himself, where he had adventures all over Arizona. From somewhere in San Diego, California, here he sits in his freshly painted oasis of chaos. Please help me in welcoming back to the show, Captain Roger. Roger, how you doing?
Oh, I'm just living the dream down here. Living the dream. How about you, Tony?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm in the middle of a trip. Anybody that can watch the video that'll be later posted on YouTube as a promo clip, you can see that my background is the hotel room here in Boston. So we'll get more into that here in just a moment. But so you've been getting a lot of stuff done around the house, keeping up with the kids' online education, and you've also been doing some flying. Now, you've told me that your flying was pretty mediocre and nothing too exciting, but you have a trip coming up that is something to be a little bit envious of. You're going to be heading out to the Caribbean for a few days? What?
Well, I don't really think anyone's going to be envious of this particular trip because I'm not actually staying in the Caribbean.
Oh. Oh, no.
So I actually need to airline all the way back so that I can fly several other trips before airlining back out there in order to bring them home. It's, I'm not looking forward to, I leave for that on next Tuesday, and I'm not looking forward to the next week and a half after that. It's going to be pretty ugly, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's another thing that it's kind of like, for us, deadheading, so a lot of people say, well, what's a deadhead? Okay, so an airline pilot, they might start a trip and in 4 days fly 6 flights where they operate every single one of them. And they do this roundabout around the country and end up back at their base on their final leg. Sometimes they don't need you to fly a leg, so they do what's called deadheading, where you have a seat in the cabin and the positive space seat, and they basically transport you from point A to point B where you're sitting in the back like a passenger. That's called a deadhead because it's a positive space. You're still working. You're actually part of the crew. You're just not operating the aircraft. Well, for you, when you say, I have to airline out, you fly the owner's aircraft into a destination, and then sometimes you're flying into an airport that's not the international airport or the main airport, and you got to jump into transportation of some kind, get on over to the main airport or the commercial airport, and then fly out on an airline back to wherever they need you to fly the very next leg. And yeah, I can see how that can be a little annoying.
It's going to be one of those things. I was looking at it and I haven't really gotten into it yet, but it's one of those where am I? Where is the airplane? The other airplane, where is my car kind of thing? Because it's going to be a mess. It's just going to be a mess. Unfortunately, we don't deal with this all too often, but just the confluence of an airplane flying out and staying in the Caribbean. And then, but we have another 2 airplanes. Both those other airplanes are flying. And so we need all the pilots back. But when we fly out of one airport, but I got to airline back into the international airport, kind of like where you're just talking about. And we've got one airplane at a different airport than where I flew out of. It's going to be a headache. And I'll just kind of leave it at that for right now.
Planes, trains, and automobiles, my friend.
It's gonna be a mess.
Uber.
I'm looking for. I'm just enjoying these last few days off before that starts.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that it'll go by very smoothly for you. And thank you again for being here. Well, as we see here on the bottom of our screen, and for those listening on the audio portion, we're very excited, as we mentioned in the intro to the show today, that we have a returning special guest, Mr. Tony Zollo. And it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you back to the show. Tony is an avid fisherman, a Grady White boat skipper, a culinary angelou, a wicked YouTuber, voted the North Shore Boston Zamboni Driver of the Year 3 times in a row, and a former Embraer 145 driver for the airline we affectionately call Sandpiper. He's a Boston native and currently a 737 driver for a major U.S. carrier that we here on the show call TransGlobal. Please help me in welcoming back to the show, Mr. Tony Z. Anthony, how you doing?
I'm well, thank you. How are you, Tony?
I'm doing okay. So, last time we were on the show together, you told me anytime you're in Boston, let me know. We'll get together, we'll go out, we'll hang out, and I'll show you, my stomping grounds. And I was so excited. I had a double Boston layover last night and tonight, and kind of reached out to you and said, hey, well, let's get together if you don't mind, and we can record a show. And, schedules, how they work out, but I'm very happy that your schedule kind of changed the last second, and tonight you were able to join us. And we thought a little bit about it, and we thought, well, for social distancing reasons and the fact that, we're both flying airplanes here in the next, for me tomorrow and for you in a couple of days, probably best to just do this over Zoom. So here we are. Recording the show. I just want to say thank you for being here. And what's been going on with you? How's the flying been going, and how's life?
The flying's been few and far between. So I think the last time that I was on the show, we talked a little bit about the short-term LOA, or short-term in the sense it's maximum duration 2 years. Hopefully it'll be a lot sooner than that based upon some exit triggers with it. But as part of that LOA, the seniority level that I'm at, we're taking a pretty big hit in terms of basically credit hours. So we're at the point where at my level of seniority, our credit hours are only guaranteed at 35. Some people are averaging maybe a little bit higher than that, but that's basically where I fall. So it's almost like working half a month is really what it is. Oh, wow. So the new payroll protection plan is supplementing the difference here near term for that. But that just makes it work and half schedule. And in the meantime, just kind of hanging out at the house, watching the dog, and just trying to stay healthy, stay fit, get to the gym, be productive, spinning up my side business. I've been busy with that, trying to grow my social media footprint. Not an easy thing to do, as I'm sure you're well aware. I've spent the past week and a half or so trying to figure out the intricacies and nuances of Instagram. So that's a whole mystery to me right now. But yeah, basically that, and then flying the odd trip here and there.
Yeah. And, hats off to you. I see the website's been developed, and now you've got the YouTube channel is starting to ramp up. And so congratulations, man. I really, my hat's off to you. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, no, thank you. It is. Rome wasn't built in a day. I mean, 2 days, but good things take time.
Yeah, and we are talking about Life by Z. So on Instagram, YouTube, and whatnot, just do a search for Life by Z, and you'll find Mr. Zollo's motivational.
I'll take that a step.
What's that?
Yeah, I'll take that a step further. It's there's a Facebook group, Life by Z. There's also Instagram, Life by Z, as well as lifebyz.com, and my YouTube channel under the same heading. But stop on by and check it out. Basically, what I'm doing is personal consulting, just trying to help people figure things out, get organized, stay on track, accomplish things, sort of guide them in the right direction. And that's what I'm doing. So one little step at a time here, and building the client base, building the following, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, congratulations on that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the show as well. So for myself, I realized I was listening to some of the older episodes, and I realized I always ask you guys what's going on, and I don't really kind of dive into what I've been doing. I just kind of mention it as we go. So for myself, I have been flying quite a bit. January, I had about 2 weeks off towards the end of January, and I took that opportunity, as we've mentioned before in the podcast, to help Roger out a little bit. And I started diving into my remodel jobs that I've been putting on hold. As we mentioned in the last podcast, I've been using COVID as an excuse to not swing a hammer, but man, Home Depot loves me. We've been stocking up with a garage full of all kinds of things, from vanities to light fixtures to shower surrounds and bathtubs and things like that. And so, coming up here in about 2 weeks, I've got a vacation coming up, and in those a week and a half of days off, I will be knee deep in home renovations. So that's what I've been doing. Like I mentioned earlier, the trip that I'm on is a nice 3-day. It was Los Angeles direct to Washington, DCA, Washington Reagan. Pilots, by the way, a little side note, do not call Reagan International Airport Reagan International Airport. That is, unless you want to be put into a holding pattern for 20 minutes while you think about what you've done. Because ATC controllers are not very fond of the actions that former President Ronald Reagan took against the controllers when they were trying to strike and talk about fair wages, and basically replace them all. And that's the short of it. But so whenever you're listening to whatever you are, ATC live, ATC, or whatever you're listening to, or if you have a scanner of your own or what have you, the pilots never call Reagan International Reagan. They say Washington Tower, Washington ground, for that reason. And ask me how I know. Because when I was a new first officer at a regional airline, and I'm reading the chart, and at the top, and I look on the right-hand corner of the JEP chart of the approach plate, and it says Reagan International. So I said, Reagan Tower, this is so-and-so, Sandpiper 123, we're onto it. And the controller, in a female voice, she goes, Reagan Tower, huh? And the captain looks at me and goes, dude, what did you do? She's like, well, and then he cues up the mic right away and goes, he's new. And she's like, oh, well, we'll let that slide. You're clear to land, runway 19. I was like, oh, thank God. What did I do? And then after we landed, he explained the whole thing, and I had no idea. So so straight leg, the DCA, and then aircraft swap from the Neo, the 321 Neo, jumped into an old 319. And went on up to Boston. Relatively quick flight. I think we landed 30 minutes ahead of schedule, which pretty much meant we kept getting shortcuts all the way. It was kind of nice to cross over JFK and LaGuardia at 25,000 feet and look down on a beautiful clear night after a storm had passed through a day or two before, and just to see all the streets covered in white and the lights and everything. It was just beautiful. So yeah, Boston last night, and then this morning I did the DCA Boston shuttle. Left Boston this afternoon, late afternoon, went down to DC, had a pretty quick turn of it, and exchanged captains. So the captain I was flying with was pretty much done, so he went home, and then I had another captain who was deadheaded into DCA from LA earlier in the day, and then we flew one leg back to Boston, and here I am at the beautiful Westin Hotel. A really wonderful place, downtown Boston. The ride in from the airport was beautiful. I did what I think most flight crews should do more of, and they've gotten away from it, because you get in a van with your entire flight crew and every single face is illuminated as they're staring down into their lap at their phones, and they forget to look outside and see how beautiful this destination could be on the drive. And so I kept my phone in my pocket, and I just kept looking out the window, and man, some beautiful architecture out here, and the history, the museums. I'd love to just stay out here for a while and visit some great locations and really dive into the history of this place. So, Anthony,
no shortage of that around there.
What's that?
Yeah, there's no shortage of that around there.
Yeah, that's for sure. And and you live in a beautiful place, Anthony. I got to tell you. Well, let's get started with the show. Today we have a pretty heavy schedule of items that we're going to try to get to, and hopefully we can get to all of them. From the Dallas Morning News, in an article that I came across just yesterday by Kyle Arnold, dated February 3rd of 2021, entitled "American Airlines Will Send Out 13,000 New Furlough Notices to Employees on Friday." Well, that was this morning. With demand stagnating and more government relief uncertain, the Fort Worth-based carrier plans to furlough workers again on April 1st. In a letter from CEO Doug Parker and President Robert Isom, they indicated that as we closed out last year with the successful extension of the payroll support program, we fully believed that we would be looking at a summer schedule where we'd be flying all of our airplanes and need the full strength of our team, they said. Regrettably, that is no longer the case. The warnings don't mean furloughs are certain, but are intended to alert employees who could temporarily lose their jobs. The airline's union's employees have recall rights, but it could be several months until demand is significant enough to justify bringing workers back. The article goes on to say that Parker and Isom said that the company's passenger traffic will be down 45% during the first 3 months of this year, and based on current demand outlook, we will not fly all of our aircraft this summer as planned. The TSA data shows that the number of passengers flying out of the U.S. in airports is still down by more than 60% from a year ago. And also, United Airlines has issued 14,000 furlough warnings to its employees, while the Dallas-based Southwest Airlines said it won't furlough any employees or cut wages this year. It is offering voluntary leaves and early retirement to workers in an effort to trim costs. American and other airlines are now pinning hopes on an upcoming stimulus program being negotiated by federal lawmakers that will again include help for airlines. And the article will be posted in the show notes here. It goes on with a lot more data about who's getting furloughs and the union's responses. But I got to tell you, when I read this, I thought, oh crap, here we go again. Another bad year. I had no idea if I was going to be affected, how deep this was going to go, and how many pilots were going to be affected by that 13,000 number. At Legacy Airlines, the sister company here, we've been dealing with this same thing. And I know that TransGlobal has kind of been issuing some of these warn letters that the media is not talking about as well, right, Anthony?
So my understanding of that, and I could be wrong on this, you just said 14,000 a minute ago, which I'm not going to doubt or discredit that. The number sounds a little bit high, but we had a lot of flight attendants, for example, that were furloughed, but now under this latest payroll protection program, they have to bring those flight attendants back.
Correct.
So, where that's only going to be a temporary, measure that's going to get them through, at least as things stand right now, not barring basically, a CARES 3.0, so to speak. That would only go through the end of March. So I would imagine that those furlough notices are sort of baked into the cake, if you will,
yes.
If that makes any sense. And again, that's just an assumption, my understanding of it. So yeah, I mean, that's really the only thing I can kind of, comment on intelligently or even semi-intelligently at this point.
Yeah, that's my understanding too. The same over at American and at Legacy Airlines as well. That they're the pilots and that's cumulative, all the employees, not just the pilots and the flight attendants and whatnot, but throughout all the labor departments, those were the numbers. And
okay, that would make more sense then.
Yeah, and so by that logic, what was going to happen was there were pilots that have been waiting to get back on the line as demand would increase. Right now, they're payroll protected, so they're basically staying at home, collecting a minimum monthly guarantee of sorts, and they're not flying. And they're waiting for their class date to go get requalled, do their landings, whatever they had to do, go back to the base where they were and get back on the line, whether that be reserve or whatnot. And before that can happen, because of the projections, now they're having to give out these warn letters, as we've spoken about in previous shows, legal responsibility of the company after an idea of a mass layoff. They have to give 60, or in some cases like New York, 90 days notice to the employees that are affected that, hey, you may get laid off. So these pilots especially are feeling like, wait a minute, just when I thought I was coming back, now you're announcing you're going to give warn letters again. So it's this seesaw effect of stress and anxiety amongst the
stress
unstable part of the job.
The thing is this: when you talk about this whole COVID thing, and we're almost a year into it now. I mean, certainly when this thing first went down, my rational, level-headed, sort of part of me, looked at things and said, all right, hey, this is going to be a lean year, where the airlines are going to lose money. It's not going to be good. We'll come out of this, will be okay. But, like I said, the rational, level-headed part of me never would have thought that this thing would have stretched out to what it's gone through. And when you try to apply logic and reason to a lot of things with this, again, not to be repetitive, but like the logical, rational, reasonable part of me that's looking at this going, oh yeah, this will happen. That'll happen. You're not seeing all those things happening. Moral of my story here is that you can't apply logic and reason to this. So with that being said, my disclaimer here, logic and reason makes me think, well, okay, let's wait and see what happens this summer as the vaccines come out. People will get the vaccines. More people will start traveling. The big thing is foreign countries opening up their borders to incoming international travel. Again, the rational part of me likes to think that that's what's going to happen, and that will level the playing field, to basically normalcy, if you will. But I don't know. When you apply logic and reason to this thing, right from the start, that sort of seems to be out the window. So anybody's guess. Who knows? It could be as dark as they predict. It could be the polar opposite of that. I mean, it's just that much of a crapshoot.
Yeah. And Rob, you were flying just recently. What were people saying about this announcement?
Well, mainly I just had conversations with the captain. The flight attendants that were working our flights are, as you can imagine, they're very senior, just because, all the junior ones, like you just talked about, are sitting at home, collecting the PSP money. So the captain has been with us for over 30 years already. He came to the 737 fleet from flying the 787 and the 777. So he said he was furloughed for about 2 years at one point. And in conversation with him about this, I mean, he was so far removed from the whole situation, because it really doesn't affect him other than, how he bids, what overnights he's going to go to and stuff like that. So it was kind of, he was curious as to what I thought. And, I don't know very much about it. Obviously, I know that, the warn letter came out and we talked about that. And I told him, how many pilots they were looking at warning. And it was 1,850.
Mm-hmm.
And, he asked me right away, hey, are you in that? And I said, well, I checked, no, but you never know how they count that stuff because we have so many different seniority numbers based on date of hire and, relative seniority.
People out on leave,
people
all
out
that,
on mill leave and all that stuff. So it's really hard to really figure out which number you need to go by. But long story short is thankfully I'm not like you are, like you're not, I'm not. So that's kind of the conversation, how it went.
Yeah.
Talked to another buddy of mine, a fellow West Winder. Tailwinder. And he was thankful that we weren't in that situation either. So
yeah.
And
Roger, we've talked about how you've really kind of dodged the bullet because just a year ago we were talking about letters of recommendation and dusting off your resumes and getting your online apps out there because you were thinking, it's time for me to join the club and head on over to the airline industry. I think maybe this is a good time to do it. You saw the projections with hiring and everything, and then this happened. And we were talking the other day how, man, you really dodged a bullet here. What are your thoughts?
Fortunately, I am undesirable.
Well, don't say that.
Roger, we're talking about aviation, Roger. We're talking about flying.
I am aviation-wise undesirable. And it's been the greatest gift I could have gotten.
Oh, okay,
that's just kind of, I guess the luck of the draw for all intents and purposes. I am not nearly as affected as you guys are.
Yeah.
It's definitely affected things, but the security of my job has never really been threatened. So I feel extremely fortunate about that. And also that, like you were saying, I definitely, who could have seen this coming and looking at all the legacy carriers and their projections and everything, who wouldn't look at the opportunities that they were offering, but you can't make this stuff up,
Crazy.
Yeah.
You know what, if I may interject, not really interject, but bring this up. You know what's throwing things off for me personally? And I enjoyed seeing the news and I thought it was great, but you see these other companies saying, hey, we're going to start hiring again. Like, I forget, was it Spirit, Frontier.
Yeah.
And all these other airlines. So
even United said they were going to hire.
Yeah.
Just recently.
I see all that stuff. So, I'm not sure if it's just like a, kind of the delay in things on how the, the news gets out of the PR world of the airline office there. But, I'm sure there's a little bit of cavitation that goes along with the announcement. And then we're going, well, yeah, the projections look good 2 weeks ago, but now they suck,
Yeah.
So,
well, I think there's truth to the fact that this is a strategy. And there's truth to the fact that some of this, with the warning letters going out or warn letters going out today and a couple days ago with other major airlines, it's, I think, a way to get the political spectrum out there to pay attention to the airlines so that when they're writing legislation to pass more stimulus, which is, no matter how you look at it, depending on what side of the aisle you may participate in or what kind of financial goals you think our country should be going in, stimulus, the more stimulus you put out, the more in debt and the less value when you print more money.
I also feel it's not so much just for that. I think it's just another way of putting pressure on the government and local governments and everything like that, just to open up the economy. because, yeah, we're talking about PSP, stimulus money and all that stuff, but what really needs to happen is the world just needs to open up again, and it needs to start right here in, hometown USA. So, a lot of these people live and work in these towns that, especially some of the hubs that TransGlobal and Legacy have, a lot of these hubs are shut down because of the way their local or their city or their state governments are running things. And, you cross right over the border to another state and, they're doing just fine. They're making ends meet, and I wouldn't say they're doing just fine, but their businesses are open, people are working, kids are going to school,
and yet their numbers are dropping in terms of infections and whatnot. So I think this is all kind of a strategy. At the same time, you're right. Like, the projections on one week might be different than the projections in the other, and as the news comes out about vaccine rollout being slower in some states than others, I've found out recently that it depends on what state you live in. If you live in Nevada, they're on 1B, transportation workers. They're going out and getting vaccines. But if you live in California, even though 1B is the next one to go, they're still not done with the essential workers, 1A. So depending on the state you live in, North Carolina being another one, Arizona being another one, you could be getting your first round of vaccinations right now as a transportation worker. But in other states, you can't, because they're still behind and they're not where they need to be. So, this is very much a state-by-state issue. I think that the airlines are having the strategy in order to put pressure on Congress to get them more relief, more money in the stimulus program. And speaking of that, the question really is, will CARES 3.0 be helping payroll protection? From CNBC, an article published just yesterday by Leslie Josephs, airline laborers unions push for a third round of federal aid with travel demand still depressed. This article was interesting because it said American Airlines and United Airlines have warned some 27,000 employees cumulatively that they could be furloughed. The travel demand remains low, and slow rollout of the vaccines have dashed hopes for recovery. The second round of federal payroll aid expires after March 31st. So they go on to say how, the current round of aid at $15 billion expires on the 1st. And these airlines, said, hey, we could be potentially laying off 27,000 jobs. So maybe it's time that we get the CARES Act 3.0 passed so that we can keep these people out of the unemployment line and keep them working. And I think it worked, because after I landed here in Boston tonight, I did a quick scrolling of the news feed and found out that this morning they actually passed the new stimulus, the Biden-Harris stimulus plan, in the Senate on a 51-50 vote. And it made history because it was a tie, and the tiebreaker in that situation is the vice president. So Vice President Harris was the tiebreaker to 51. So what does this mean? Well, we don't have the verbiage in front of us. We don't have the outline of the bill, and it still has to go through the House of Congress, which they had a separate bill that they had passed. So now we have until about mid-March, according to this article, for all the details and the amendments to this bill to get in there. The question is, will this include a new payroll protection for airlines? And with this budget resolution nearly complete, Congress can now turn in earnest to writing Biden's expansive pandemic relief proposal into law and push it through the Senate without Republican votes if necessary under the special rules unlocked by budget legislation. That process will take weeks, with Democrats eyeing mid-March as the deadline for final passage of the relief legislation, because that is when enhanced unemployment benefits will expire if Congress doesn't act fast. And as we mentioned, a senior U.S. lawmaker told reporters at Reuters that the COVID-19 relief package, the 3.0 package, would include a new round of payroll assistance for U.S. airline workers. Representative Peter DeFazio, who chairs the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, told reporters at the White House that the new round of airline government assistance would extend restrictions on executive compensation and stock buyouts. The U.S. airlines have been awarded $40 billion in payroll since March, and airline unions last week asked Congress for another $15 billion to keep the thousands of workers on the payroll past March 31st. So until probably here in the next few days and hours, we'll see what this entails. Maybe those warn letters will go out and the 0 furloughs will happen.
Possible. Could be rescinded.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. What do you guys?
The other thing too, and I think last time that I was on, we touched on this, is that oftentimes with situations like this, there sort of becomes this stigma that the airlines are getting bailed out. Man, the airlines are on the hook to pay all that money back. And we've talked about this before. It happened, it happened after 9/11, and it's going to happen here again. This money isn't free money. This money's getting paid back. This is think of this as like bridge loan. This is just here you go. Don't worry about it. I mean, that's the reality of this. So even once the airlines start actually getting back, into profitability, let's just say, what do you think is going to happen with that profitability? It's going to go to pay down debt. So even though they're going to start making money, they're not really going to be actually cash positive here for quite some time. So that's the reality of the matter. It's not a freebie. That money's being paid back.
Now, when you say that the airlines are going to be paying back, what do you mean? I remember you gave us some detail about that the last time you were on the show. What do you mean?
All this money. I mean, it's not like this is just hey, here you go. Don't worry about it. I mean, this money is going to be paid back. Like 9/11.
Yeah, here's $1.9 billion, man. Go ahead, just take it.
Right.
Thanks. Yeah,
we
love you guys.
Yeah, and after 9/11, a lot of people said, they said the same type of thing. Look at this, the airlines are getting bailed out. No, the airlines are getting bailed out. I mean, it was basically the reality of the matter is, okay, look, if you don't step in and do something, and this is talking about 9/11, we're going back quite a ways. Had there not been some sort of intervention on behalf of the government at that particular point, basically we wouldn't have had an air transportation industry left. Okay, we would have had nothing. So they were compelled to have to do something in that particular case, which they did. But the airlines paid that money back. They paid it back actually ahead of schedule and even with interest too. So the reason I mention this is just that I think that there's oftentimes when you talk about these types of things, it's this, oh yeah, look at all these corporate bailouts, all these big corporations getting money. And well, you keep in mind, they're getting money. There's a reason why they're getting it. If you let them go insolvent, there's the unemployment factor, but there's also the national interest to the country. How are we going to have an air transportation system? Okay. And at the same time, too, where it's essential, you need it. Okay. Again, those companies are still paying that back. And the point that I was trying to make, and not to be repetitive, is that even once these companies do start turning a profit, they're still going to be in the situation where they have to pay that money back. So the reality of airlines being truly profitable, cash positive profitability, that's still going to be quite some time, even once they stop hemorrhaging the money that they're already losing right now. And obviously for selfish reasons, I want to see this go through. But the reality of the matter is, as a country, we can't just keep on printing money. We got to start really evaluating that. I mean, 1, possibly 2 rounds of this, okay, but pressing up on the third, there's that part of me as just a U.S. citizen that says, okay, I don't want anyone to lose their job, but we can't devalue our currency and live off of credit card debt, which is effectively what we're going to be doing on a larger economic scale here.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And that's really the scariest part of this, I think, is that we keep doing this. I too am selfish that I want to see, my brothers and sisters keep their jobs with protections because we are a vital role of the economy, as we've mentioned before.
Right.
But at the same time, I don't want it to devalue our nation's currency and just keep deep diving into more and more national debt that we're never going to get out of.
Yeah.
Which could be dangerous.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing that can be the trifecta in all this, if there ever is one, is we meaning the industry have benefited from very, very low fuel prices in the past few years. And, here we are suffering from a pandemic, which has brought us to our knees. Fuel prices are pretty much low right now, but, my biggest fear is we get over this pandemic. And with the new administration in place now, and the way they're handling the energy solutions of our country, we may have another spike in the price of fuel, which has always been, an airline's biggest expense: labor and fuel. So, going into debt to keep everybody on staff, and then, going into debt to take these PSP loans, surviving the pandemic to be brought back to our knees because of labor and fuel costs is something that, it's if it happens, I wouldn't be surprised. But oh my God, I hope it doesn't.
That would be a
so Rob, kind of speak to that point right there. See that poster right over my shoulder there?
Yeah, I do.
All the different airlines. With what you're sort of alluding to, and everybody thinks I'm crazy, that thing may have to be reworked, because I think that possibly longer term force some sort of, merger 2.0. I mean, I think I've said it before on this podcast that I don't think merger mania is done yet. I still think that there's going to be another round of that, and like I said, I mean, that, who knows, that could all be reworked over there in time. So
and a couple airlines just formed alliances, lately.
Yes,
we all know that JetBlue and American are doing something together on the East Coast. I know something's going on the West Coast with Alaskan Airlines. Not to say that that's what's going to happen, but there's some interesting moves taking place right now, and I'm sure it's going on behind closed doors at some other major network or major legacy carrier out there. So yeah.
And what's the point of all this? The only reason I wanted to mention what's going on with the warn letters and this, CARES 3.0, which it looks like it's going to go through. Their positive news has been coming from the negative news that came only hours before. That was followed by some more positive news with the news that airlines were being hired. This whipsaw it's absolutely exhausting for anybody that's in the career and that it affects. Now, Rob, earlier you mentioned you flew with a captain, 30 years on the flight line. It doesn't affect them. You can ask him a question about it, what he thinks or what she thinks, and you're going to get a response, well, I really haven't been following it. I don't know. Which there's no, fault for that. I mean, that's his or her prerogative. But I truly believe that when you're in an industry, in a particular niche that we are in aviation, as small as it is, regardless if you're an airline pilot, a corporate pilot, a cargo pilot, if you have wings pinned on your breast as you walk out the door in uniform or not, or you just have wings in a virtual sense and you're flying a private operator, either way, this is your industry and it affects you. And if your son or daughter were a new hire and this was affecting, I guarantee you'd be paying attention to what's going on and how it's going to affect their livelihood and their quality of life. So I'm not saying is that you have to, be all in to find out if this doesn't affect you, but it really is the responsible and really respectful thing to do is to at least pay attention.
Yeah. And you jarred my memory just now when you said that the captain I flew with this past weekend, who I told you he really didn't pay too much attention to it. And I guess I should rephrase that. He just didn't know that it was happening, currently, that the warn letters were going out. He does have a daughter that is a flight attendant who was furloughed or is furloughed, and is living at his house back again, 30 years old. I mean, there's a lot of detail, but he did talk about, how she misses flying, and she hopes that she can get back in the air soon, and with everything that's going on, that.
So. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, Rob. Sorry.
No, good. That's good. I was just saying. That was it, pretty much.
So a couple things I'll add about that. I'll start off with this. Actually, a few things. So, talking about, someone that basically loses this job, I mean, that's never an easy thing to go through period. Whether or not you have recall rights or you don't, it's never an easy thing to go through. But particularly in this job where the job really becomes, your life. Okay. It really kind of becomes, an embodiment of who you are. This is, it's more than a job. It's a lifestyle for people. So there's that aspect of it too. But I think that to take that a step further and look at it in the aggregate, one of the worst things I think that's happened here with COVID is the fact that, okay, look, obviously people have died. Mind you, I said one of the worst things here. Okay. But it's the fact that, people have lost purpose. They've had purpose taken away from them, whether it's, you've been furloughed as an airline employee or anything, when you take that purpose away from people, you have nothing to do, that is a real emotionally devastating thing to have to contend with. Now, and the second factor, the second aspect of that too is, where, we're looking at a lot of the more senior people. I think that, from the emotional perspective, they're looking at it in the sense that, well, I'm well insulated enough that I don't have to worry about being furloughed. I've got another couple of years left to go. Yeah. Worst case, if things went totally south, I know from this point on, I'm basically coasting in, I'm okay. And I think that there's very much an element of that, a little bit of disengagement, which I can understand on the behalf of like the more senior people who are kind of short timing it towards retirement. Yeah. And Tony, you had also brought up another point, which this subject sort of reminds me, of something else, and particularly, where you make it relative to, to airlines. But you sort of what you had said about, think about it, if it were your daughter, you might feel differently about it too. Just I guess more in a more aggregate sense, it is going off into a little bit of a tangent conversation. On a level playing field, when, things are going good with the airlines, you hear people all the time, talk about, I can't believe the ticket prices went up and, and so this isn't fair and it shouldn't cost this much. And I should be able to fly here and there for, super short money. It's like, well, okay, think about it like this, and I'm just gonna make up an arbitrary example. Say if that's somebody who happens to work for one of the cell phone providers or something like that, I could very easily have the position of, my cell phone bill should be a lot less expensive, but whose expense is that going to be at too at the same time? We're all in this together. When it comes down to affecting you, people will always look at that a little bit differently. And I think that, Tony, that's an element of that you sort of reminded me of, because that's something that I've always kind of felt as well.
Yeah. And one thing we talked about, though, I remember a conversation I did have with the captain. And now that we're talking about it more, it's jarring my memory of the conversations we had. But one of the things we talked about, too, is, this is probably a conversation for another time, but anyway, from the flight attendant side of the house, the furloughs, all the flight attendants that were furloughed were pretty much the new hires from like 2013 and on.
Right.
And those are all like the fresh new faces, the young ones right out of college or high school, whatever the case may be. And, I don't think that those, I'm sure there was a lot of them that did, but I think most of those individuals looked at this, position that they now have as just a job, as opposed to how we look at it as a career, something we really have. I mean, obviously they had to go through a training program that is, we've all heard that it's really tough. And it's really, they're held to a really high standard to get certified and everything, but it's still, when I think some of them got the news that they were getting furloughed, a lot of them are just like, all right, well, I'll go do something else.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of them are upset. I did see some emotion from a lot of people because like Anthony said, that's a lifestyle. It's something that people look forward to do. And I think those are some of the people that would turn this into a career for themselves. But from that point of view, it's just a job for most of them. And the ones that have been here for 20 years, 30 years, and, there's one that are back on reserve again, their career-wise, their careers, this is a career for them. Pilots, it's a career. It's not a job. I mean, there's very few people that treat this like just a job.
Years of training are involved.
The ones that just treat it as a job probably have something else going on, second job or something else that they're more passionate about. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents, and remember that from our conversation.
Yeah, we have years of training and training expenses, years behind this. So if we are out of work, we can't just go and pick up and go, well, I was working for A, I'm just going to go work for B. and pick up where I left off. No, you if A is doing poorly, B is doing poorly, C is doing poorly, all the other airlines are doing poorly. So you have to get creative. And I know a lot of information boards and social media boards that are out there to help furloughed pilots right now. People are posting jobs up there all the time. Hey, I know a guy out. If you live out in this area, submit your application. I
was going to say, a lot of people don't realize that our industry isn't like other industries where, your years of experience carry over to your next job if you do happen to go to one. For us, we're a seniority-based industry, mainly, especially at all the at the airline level. You leave one job or one company and you go to another, you start all the way at the bottom again, regardless of how many hours of experience you have.
Pay scale,
you
everything.
Look at the military guys pay scale and everything. You look at military guys who come out of the military with, some guys 5, 10, 15, 20,000 hours of flight experience. They start off at the airline, they're bottom of the totem pole. They're treated just, they're new hires. They're only there because they're qualified. That's it. So anyway, with that being said, I don't think very many listeners may not know that. So it's not easy to just go from one airline to another airline or from one aviation job to another aviation job due to that aspect.
Yep. And we're gonna discuss a little bit about the mandatory vaccinations and an amazing aviator from our past right after the break. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the second half of episode 70 of the Squawk Ident Podcast. Again, I want to thank my co-hosts, Rob D. and Captain Roger, for joining me today on this remote recording from Boston, Massachusetts, where I share a location with our special guest today, Anthony Zollo from Life by Z, who is giving us his input on this CARES Act that we've been talking about, the furlough, the warn letters, all this crap that we have to deal with again here at the mainline carrier. Now, I think, if you're listening and you're just starting out in aviation, or you're learning how to fly, or in training right now, or you just think that aviation's cool to learn more about, and someday maybe this will be the career path for you, I think there's a lot of value in listening to us debate back and forth about how this is affecting us, because yes, although this is new to all of us with this pandemic going on, we've heard about it in fiction and film and books, but we've never really had to deal with it, at least in our lifetimes. And so we're all on new territory here, and who knows what the future holds. So learn from our mistakes. That's number one. Let's learn from our triumphs, and hopefully the next generation that has to deal with this will be able to make better decisions, smarter decisions, so that there's less stress and turmoil for the group. We, like we said 100 times before, are all in this together. Once you have wings pinned on, your uniform, or you get your private pilot license, or you go for your first solo or your first discovery flight, welcome to the club. I mean, we got to take care of each other, and spreading the knowledge about what we're going through right now is part of that, so that hopefully it'll help you make decisions in the future. But let's move on. So in a segment I'm going to bring back that we haven't talked about in a while, WTF. From simpleflying.com, in an article by Luke Bodell dated February 3rd of 2021, entitled United CEO Explains His Thoughts on Mandatory Vaccinations. Scott Kirby, the CEO of United Airlines, has reaffirmed the airline's position on mandatory vaccinations, claiming that the practice will become widespread once other companies pick up on it. United's leadership is looking to vaccinate all of its 60,000 strong workforce, who are considered essential workers. Last month, CEO Kirby outlined the airline's intention to mandate vaccinations in a virtual town hall meeting with employees. However, United doesn't want to be the only carrier adopting such a policy. Kirby has encouraged other companies to get on board with compulsory vaccinations, saying, "I'm realistic enough. While I think it's the right thing to do, I know United Airlines alone can't do it and have it stick. There doesn't have to be a ton of others, but there have to be others." Other airlines, including Delta and American, have shown a reluctance to adopt mandatory vaccines. American has stated that it encourages its employees to get vaccinated, but won't mandate it, while Delta is yet to comment on the issue. Meanwhile, Southwest has pledged to vaccinate all of its employees for free once the jab is widely available, but it won't be mandatory as of yet. So, what are your guys' thoughts on this? Now, I know in the cockpit we talk about this. Are you gonna volunteer? Are you gonna go get it? Or are you gonna wait till they make it mandatory? And there's a lot of debate, not just amongst our industry, but around the world right now about these vaccinations. Rob, let's start with you.
Well, personally, I think I will eventually get vaccinated. So, with that being said, I will wait to get vaccinated. I think it's too soon right now. Just I'm not much of a vaccine kind of person. I never get the flu shot. When I was in the military, they were you had to get all these shots in the military if you had to deploy. And one of the shots that was very controversial when I was in was an anthrax shot. And it was just too soon as far as the development research and, not knowing what the side effects were. And I don't like to put anything in my body that I don't know what's going to happen. So, and that's kind of how I feel about, this COVID shot right now. I mean, it looks like the success rate is pretty high, but I still think it's really, really early. It's too soon. It was rushed. Part of me says, it's amazing how, and I think it's good, but I think it's amazing how they can, develop this vaccine in such a rapid period of time. But, we can't cure cancer. We can't, the common cold comes around every year and we can't get something for that. So wait. Funny how
you do realize that no one has had the common cold now for quite some time, about a year, actually. No one's had the flu, right?
The flu.
It's COVID or nothing. That's
exactly.
That's
my whole thing. And it's funny that, the United States has the highest numbers in the world when we have the best medicine in the world. Really? Why is that? Is it because people are out there and partying it up and everything like that? I don't think so. I think it's the way it's our lifestyle. It's the way we live. There's a lot of people that are inherently they say there's people that genetically are more susceptible to have problems, complications from COVID because of, whether it be their weight or, their food choices or stuff like that. So, you look at other countries and they have problems, but, China, I guess China's, we don't like to talk anything good about China, but, they seem to have a good handle on it. Why aren't they having the same numbers and issues that like we are?
Rob, who knows if they really are? I mean, can
you
really?
And that's exactly what I mean. Is people are always skeptical whenever you just say the word China, but seriously, I mean,
the market's back open in Wuhan, and they've let the inspectors in on the lab and all these things. But granted, they were locked down to where you would be shot in the street.
They were.
If you were out, breaking curfew. Americans would never in a million years stand for such things.
We have masks, we have quarantines, we have schools shut down. I mean, airlines grounded. we went through the same kind of hoops and everything like that. But anyway, as far as the vaccine goes, I'm going to wait. But there's some exciting news happening here in our county in concerning the vaccine, and you guys may have heard of it. It's pretty exciting. I think our county's setting the standard, and they're setting it really high for the world or for the country. Our county has received a whole bunch of vaccines, and they went ahead and set up a drive-through vaccine location at Texas Motor Speedway, and they're able to do 1,000 vaccines an hour, 14,000 vaccines a day. So they're pushing it through really fast, and people said that they make an appointment, and they're able to get in within a week, and then once they get there, they're there 15 minutes to get the shot, and then they have to wait 15 minutes for post shot to see if there's any side effects, and then they're free to go. And people say, pretty much they get there, they're there a half hour and they're gone. Wow. So it's pretty exciting as far as vaccine shots are concerned, because it's not that successful in some of the other counties and some of the other parts of the country where they're having a hard time getting it. So anyway, thought that'd be something people should ought to hear.
Yeah. And Roger, what about you? Are you have you gotten the first shot yet, or are you going to get it, or how's that work?
I have definitely not gotten any shot. I'm here in California, and I don't think that the availability of the shot will be around for probably another 3 months or so. However, all of my prognostications ever since COVID started have pretty much not come true. So who's to say how that's all going to go? Yeah, I don't really, in terms of Kirby and United, I don't really know if it goes in the WTF category for me, but at the same time, I think it's a little odd to try and force an entire corporation and their employees into something like a vaccine. I guess a little opposite from Rob. I am very pro-vaccine. However, I also don't think that it's any CEO, CFO, chairman of the board, any of their position to be able to basically force their employees to get a vaccine. At the same time, I appreciate where his heart is, because I think that he's trying to do it. I do not think that there is anything malicious behind that. I think that his heart is in the right place. Is like, look, we want to try and keep people, I want to keep my employees from getting sick, and I want to try and keep my employees from then infecting other people. I 100%, and this is I don't think I've ever said this about a CEO before, but I 100% think that his position on that issue is in the right place. However, I think he might be slightly overreaching, but I can appreciate where he's coming from. And I guess that's pretty much all I have to say on that. I don't want to, obviously the whole vaccination thing just as a whole can really open a can of worms.
Yeah. Yeah. And Anthony, what about you? Are you looking forward to getting the jab in the arm, or is this something you're going to wait as well?
Enthusiastically looking forward to getting the jab in the arm. Sign me up. Put me in, coach. I'm ready. Give me that thing right now. Look, here's the reality of the matter, folks. We're all going to get the virus, or we're going to get the vaccine. One or the other. Take your pick. If you just look at how viral this thing has gone, that's the reality of it. We're either all going to at some point contract COVID, or you're going to get the the vaccine to preclude getting COVID. I mean, it's not the inevitability, not of the United States, of the world. Now, that's just Anthony's opinion. I'll parrot something that Roger, just said a second ago, and I sort of alluded to earlier. That's the rational thought process of mine taking over and thinking, but who knows? My sort of rational way of trying to think about this whole thing has not really proven to work out, because this thing has been anything but logical and rational right from the start. But I do think that there is truth in that sentiment when you just look at it sort of unemotionally and by the numbers. We're all bound for either getting the virus or the vaccine. Now, as far as the virus goes, I already had the virus. I, been there and done that, checked that box already. Sort of also to pick up there what Roger was talking about a minute ago, I like Kirby a lot. I definitely think his heart's in the right place. And the reality of the matter is, I think that you're going to see a lot of foreign countries are going to probably mandate the vaccine. So even if you're on a narrow body airframe, you could be flying into some foreign countries. Certainly, and you get up into flying wide bodies. I could see more foreign countries over longer distances, requiring this vaccine. So to the point, I mean, it may be sort of a requirement in terms of your overall scope of employment more than something that the company mandates. Kind of like if you're flying to China, you have to have a visa, right? That's one of the things that's required for that, and that's a term of employment. That's something that you have to have. So I think in the aggregate, this could sort of become a mandate just by virtue of you may need it to fly certain places. I do think that Kirby's side is completely in the right place, but I also agree with Roger in the sense that when you come out and you try to take this authoritarian type stance of saying, do this because we said so, that gets a little bit dangerous. And I do think that Kirby, I like the guy. I do think he has good intentions with this. Like Roger said, he's not being malicious in any of this. But, a corporate entity, especially a government, or a government entity, coming out and, making edicts and making mandates, that is setting the precedent for something really dangerous. Just as a little, for instance, type of thing, look at how far authority has basically kind of spiraled out of control in the realm of all this. I forget what it was, but I read something not too long ago that basically the headline said, the CDC now requires blah, blah, blah. And I thought to myself, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm getting a little bit dopey in my old age over here, but the CDC makes advisories and recommendations. Since when did the CDC get, authority to start making, requisite mandates, giving out orders? Did I miss something over there and understand something from the onset? I mean, I think that on a bigger, not to turn this into politics, and I won't, but I will just say this: I think the bigger issue we have to kind of look at here is sort of where's our country going, in the sense that there is a lot of power grab up for play here that's going unchallenged and unchecked, and that's setting up a real slippery slope for things in the future. But as far as the vaccine, sign me up. Rob talked a little bit about this. People have said, well, it's too early and we got this thing too fast. It might not be safe. Well, here's the thing. As far as a lot of vaccines are concerned, we've gotten vaccines in the past for things that, okay, it'd be useful to have a vaccine for whatever, okay? And we'll work on developing one, but it's not priority level urgent. We need this thing right this second, kind of like COVID was. Hence, we didn't put all of our financial and logistical resources into developing that vaccine. The other thing that we didn't do was cut a lot of the bureaucracy and red tape out of that process. Okay, so we put everything that we had in this financially, everything that we had logistically, we cut the red tape out of it. And the other thing too, is you do the homework on this, there are a lot of these technologies that were used to help develop this vaccine that have never really been used before in developing a vaccine, that by itself fast tracks this thing by a significant period of time. So as far as when you look at all those things, this whole mindset that, well, it's too fast, it came out too soon, it's automatically not safe. Well, I think that kind of precludes that argument right there. And at the same time, too, there's also precedents, like anthrax, like Rob mentioned. When I was in the military, I got that shot as well. This is the same thing about anthrax. And not everybody who took the anthrax shot dropped dead. So at the end of the day, the FDA has to approve this. They did. If the FDA thought that this was not safe or that you were going to get sick, let alone die from it, we wouldn't have the thing. I get the mindset that there's a lot of people that kind of have the attitude of, send a couple canaries down the mine first and let's see what happens. I get that. But I do think that as we see more positive feedback from this, I think that we'll see more people get it. And like I said, bigger picture, it's the virus or the vaccine, folks. Take your pick.
Yeah. I agree. Eventually, there will be a choice to be made. Now, we look at mandatory vaccinations and then we say, oh, well, you can't do that. We live in a country where it's free. And we can go down a rabbit hole of what legislation is going on within each state. I know that most states in the United States and in 3 provinces in Canada require that all children that go to public school receive certain vaccinations. And the only exceptions are for medical or religious reasons. Mississippi has taken it one step further. They do not allow an exception for religious reasons. The only time a child going to a public school can get an exception from a vaccine is if it's a medical reason that they can't get it, they can't receive it, if they're allergic to it or whatever it is. And then you look at food service. I used to work in food service, and in order for me to work in the industry, I had to get a hepatitis shot, show proof that I had a hepatitis shot to my employer. So
there's very much a precedent for this, like you're saying. Absolutely.
So yeah, you can't absolutely have to have it as a condition of employment. There are already rules in place for other things. Now, we're getting into, again, that gray area. We don't know what is going to happen in the future. I doubt that it'll be mandatory. It'll possibly be something that is recommended or a condition of certain aspects of your employment to have it. Me personally, I have no problem with the vaccine. I'm going to get in line, be the first one as soon as I get it, but I know I'm going to get it. Which one? I don't know yet, because as Rob was saying, he's going to wait to see what the best ones are, how many people have had what vaccine from what manufacturer, which ones had the least amount of side effects, which ones were more effective. And I'm going to make my decision that way, simply because I'm not going to do something haphazardly. Now, what I think is crucial that we talk about here, and if you get nothing out of this podcast, but what I'm going to say right now, I think this is the most valuable thing that we need to talk about as pilots in general. Where is the provision or insurance protecting me in the event that I take a vaccine that the company either requires me to take as a condition of my employment or recommends that I take? Either way, where is the insurance or protections indicating that if I lose my FAA medical due to a reaction that I got from the vaccine, am I going to be protected by the company that is requiring that I take it or asking that I take it? Am I going to have pay protections?
That's kind of where my heart is on this whole thing. I'm going to hold out until the company says you have to take it, and then I'm going to say, okay, which one? And then if I do,
now
it's on you if anything happens.
Yeah, right now Legacy Airlines is under contract negotiation, which obviously has been put on the back shelf because of everything that's going on in the world with this pandemic. However, when we get back to that table and it's time to renegotiate a viable contract for the future, obviously we're not going to have this strong, great contract that we were anticipating because of everything that's happened. And as Anthony was mentioning, now these companies, even to turn around to a positive cash flow, it's going to take years to recover from this. So we're going to obviously have to take a hit as an employee group. However, I would like to see that every airline and the pilot group and even flight attendant and mechanic group, all the groups that if you're being required to take a vaccination, that's fine, in my opinion. However, I would like to see contract language that indicates that if I lose my medical because of a condition or a inadverse reaction to receiving the vaccine, that I will be protected. If I see that, I'll feel a whole lot better about getting my stab in the arm.
Yep. Now, here's the thing. I think, Tony, when you're talking about something like that, you probably will see contract language that'll address that. It's a question of how solid will that contract language be, okay? Because, we all know from experience here that, a contract is only as good as the language. You tweak that thing by, one or two words in the wrong places, and that contract doesn't mean what you think that it means on the surface. So I think that there will be something. The language of that particular article or provision of the contract is going to be of the utmost importance. But here's the other thing. I think that ultimately we'll say that, okay, if it can be proven that the COVID vaccine caused you to lose your medical, then we will do A, B, and C. The real question will then be proving whether or not it was the COVID vaccine. That's going to open up this whole can of worms that, hypothetically, and God forbid, you had to go through some sort of medical review because you lost your medical. They'll say, Yeah, you lost medically, you're not qualified.
And that's part of the reason why I want to wait, because I think there's going to be, there's already been some cases where people have developed certain symptoms that they weren't expecting. So now that there's an established record of this, there's language that can be developed into a contract that says, hey, if one of our employees, pilots, whatever, gets the shot and develops these symptoms, which may become medically disqualifying, well, we can attribute that to the mandatory vaccine that you ordered us to take, and therefore we need to somehow compensate, pay, protect, whatever the case may be. But there needs to be some kind of, for me, there needs to be some kind of history, some kind of precedence. And in my personal case, that's why I'm waiting. I'd rather wait, let this thing develop, let it run its course. It's kind of like a brand new car, brand new airplane. Got to work the gremlins out of it first. We tweaked it a little. There's a different variant now. Let's get that one.
Yes.
Yeah, I just think, Rob, that the big thing will be to try to prove that, the reason why you lost your medical had to do with the COVID vaccine. I have an idea, that the way that's going to play out is, well, you lost your medical, but we don't know 100% that it's COVID. So no benefits for you, but you can't go back to flying the line either. I think there's going to be a lot of that, even if there is language in which I think there will be language, in the contract will be a provision, but that's I think that's going to be the next loophole, so to speak.
Yeah, I'd like to see just an insurance policy that's in place, that is paid for by the company, supplied by the company, that indicates that if the company mandates that all pilots or all traveling employees in the industry must take the vaccine as a condition of employment, that there is an insurance policy out there to protect the, who knows, I'm guessing here, 0.01% of employees that might develop something like, say, color blindness, or something that goes wrong with their vision, or something that just, as Rob said, a disqualifier to your medical, that there's an insurance policy that says, okay, well, due to the vaccine, and good, as you said, Anthony, good luck proving that, but due to the vaccine, you have like multiple doctors that say, yep, this is one of the side effects that we have now known in years to come, that is part from receiving it, then you would be compensated. And that's all I'm saying.
The other thing too is our a lot of our manuals and operations specs are all written in blood. You know what I mean? We know this. We can't do certain things because somebody else screwed it up, and well, we got to put it in the book so people won't do it. Well, I think that this is one of those cases. It may not be as drastic as that, but I think it's just so early on. I mean, even the FAA medicals, when the vaccines came out, they took them a couple days, a couple of weeks to decide how they were going to handle it themselves, and they finally came out and said, well, you can take the Moderna or the Pfizer vaccine, and you have to wait 48 hours afterwards. So I think that's good. I think they had to do something, but I don't think that they were all happy-go-lucky about it, because they hadn't had a chance themselves to review it themselves. So, but I think they were probably pressured by all the administrations and the government to do something, because they needed to get this stuff going. So I don't know. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah.
So do you need to have any contractual protections if the company does not mandate you to take the vaccine?
Do we what?
If they don't mandate you to take the vaccine, and it's only a suggestion, well, then it's your choice whether to take it or not. But if, as Anthony was mentioning, as what other countries around the world are now doing, is making the vaccine a mandatory part of international travel. So if you want to travel to their country on vacation, you got to take the vaccine.
Why can't I just do a COVID test? I'd rather do that. Test negative.
Well, and I think that's part of the other discussion in terms of, what Anthony started touching on with, and you, Rob, just now, other countries could make you come with some kind of proof. And that's going to be, I suspect, probably part of the reopening.
Yeah.
Is either proof that you had COVID, or that you have some kind of record of vaccination in order to open lots of things up. In the end, I don't know that any company would want to mandate you to take a vaccine. And part of that insurance is, and the insurance aspect is part of the reason why, is because it does open them up to some liability to it.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to stop there. I think I probably fall a little farther than you guys in terms of the contract. I mean, you can get the vaccine. I mean, but to expect the company to pay for it. I mean, we do have short-term, long-term insurance, no matter what you are, or you can take fighting for the vaccine, or maybe you lose your medical because of COVID, and that's your choice. And, there's always that aspect too.
There sure is.
I think there's definitely lots of layers to that onion. I would probably suspect that you'd be hard pressed to find a company that's going to force you to do something, and then because they don't want to take on that, what you guys are all, generally asking for with contractual. Hey, well, you said I had to do this, and so if something happens, pay me. And I think that's going to be
I'm also up for the a more rapid development, or rapid I guess development would be the right word, but of a rapid test for it's more common, something that can even be this is going to sound really crazy and Jepson like, if you remember that show, but something that's app based, you know what I mean, something that is developed, and it's constantly updated to your phone, your app. I mean, you do that with diabetes, glucose stuff. I mean, I'd be kind of cool if a company can rapidly develop something that is instantaneous, and it proves that you do not have the.
Didn't we talk about this like 3 shows ago? You pee on the stick to find out if you're pregnant. Come on, man.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But I mean, that'd be something so cool.
Some entrepreneur will come up with that. The free market usually solves these problems. It solves them better than the government.
Yeah.
In almost all cases. So there'll be some smart person that comes up with something for sure. It's a matter of how long.
Let's do it right here, the 4 of us.
All right.
We won't have to do this podcast anymore. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, because the money is just raking in right now.
All you need to do is figure out how to overcome science.
It's like
other
Velcro,
than that, it should be fine.
Yahoo, Amazon, all these easy things. It's like, God, why didn't I think of that?
Right. Well, eventually, if you can blow in a little thing that you can get at Costco, and it'll tell you what your blood alcohol level is, I'm sure they'll develop something that you can blow into it, and it can detect if you have the COVID virus.
Face ID, Retina ID. You used to have thumbprint ID. I'm sure they could do a DNA, COVID test ID. Just be like, okay, yep.
Remember that movie Gattaca, where in order to go into the office building, you had to get a pinprick in your finger, and it would analyze your blood, and it would tell you you're okay to pass. I mean, maybe that is like when you pass through the gates at work, you get all and it analyzes your blood, and it says you are free from contaminants.
It could be as quick as a DNA thing. So, you just got to pull a little hair out of here, stick it in the little reader. You're good to go, brother.
I don't even want to know.
I'm telling you. Hey, I'm brainstorming. I'm going to write this stuff down because I got some research to do.
Rob's got his dream board.
I'm going to call in Rich in a couple weeks. I'll see you guys later.
It's like science. Well, guys, riveting conversation about the industry and what we've been talking about here in the last 24 hours. And I do appreciate all of your input and ideas. Well, gentlemen, this month starts off month of February of every year with Black History Month. And, I really wanted to do a segment on a pioneer in aviation that really was so far ahead of her time that I had to look at the dates twice when I was doing a little bit of research. And who I'm talking about is Bessie Coleman. Bessie Coleman was an early American civil aviator. Coleman was the first African American woman, the first Native American to hold a pilot's license. She earned her license from the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale on June 15th of 1921. That's right, 1921. And she was the first Black person to earn an international pilot's license. She later became a high-profile pilot in notoriously dangerous air shows in the United States. She was popularly known as Queen Bess and Brave Bessie, and hopes to start a school for African American flyers. Her pioneering role was an inspiration to early pilots and to the African American and Native American communities.
Who was Elizabeth Bessie Coleman? She was born on January 26, 1892, in Atlanta, Texas. Bessie was the 10th of the 13th children to Georgia Coleman, whose grandparents were Cherokee, and Susan Coleman, who was African American. Only 9 of the children survived childhood, which was typical for that time. When Coleman was 2 years old, her family moved to Waxahachie, Texas, where they lived as sharecroppers. Coleman began attending school in Waxahachie at the age of 6 years old. She would walk 4 miles each day to her segregated one-room school, where she loved to read and establish herself as an outstanding math student.
Every year, Coleman's routine of school, chores, and church was interrupted by the cotton harvest. In 1901, George Coleman left his family. He returned to Oklahoma, or Indian Territory as it was then called, to find better opportunities, but his wife and children did not follow. At the age of 12, Bessie was accepted into the Missionary Baptist Church School on scholarship. When she turned 18 years old, she took her savings and enrolled in the Oklahoma Colored Agricultural and Normal University in Langston, Oklahoma, which is now known as Langston University. She completed 1 term before her money ran out and she returned home.
At the age of 23, Coleman moved to Chicago, Illinois, where she lived with her brothers. In Chicago, she worked as a manicurist at the White Sox Barbershop. There, she heard stories of flying during wartime from pilots returning home from World War I. She took a second job at a chili parlor to save money in hopes of becoming a pilot herself. American flight schools of the time admitted neither women nor blacks. So Robert S. Abbott, the founder and publisher of the Chicago Defender, encouraged her to study abroad. Abbott publicized Coleman's quest in his newspaper, and she received financial scholarship from banker Jesse Binga and the Defender.
Bessie Coleman took a French language class at the Berlitz Language School in Chicago and then traveled to Paris on November 20th, 1920, so she could earn her pilot's license. She learned to fly in a Nearport 564 biplane with a steering system that consisted of a vertical stick, the thickness of a baseball bat in front of the pilot, and a rudder bar under the pilot's feet. On June 15th, 1921, Coleman became the first Black woman and first Native American to earn an aviation pilot's license, and the first Black person and first Native American to earn an international aviation license from the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale.
Determined to polish her skills, Coleman spent the next 2 months taking lessons from a French ace pilot near Paris. Then in September of 1921, she sailed for America. She found herself a media sensation when she returned to the United States. She was quoted to say that the air is the only place free from prejudices. I knew we had no aviators, neither men nor women, and I knew the race needed to be represented along this most important line. So I thought it's my duty to risk my life to learn aviation.
With the age of commercial flight still a decade or more in the future, Coleman quickly realized that in order to make a living as a civilian aviator, she would have to become a barnstorming stunt flyer, performing dangerous tricks in the then still early technology of airplanes for paying audiences. But to succeed in this highly competitive arena, she would need advanced lessons and a more extensive repertoire.
Returning to Chicago, Coleman could not find anyone willing to teach her. So in February of 1922, she sailed again for Europe. She spent the next 2 months in France, competing an advanced course in aviation. She then left for the Netherlands to meet with Anthony Fokker, one of the world's most distinguished aircraft designers. She also traveled to Germany, where she visited the Fokker Corporation and received additional training from one of the company's chief pilots. She later returned to the United States to launch her career in exhibition flying. Queen Bess, as she was known, was a highly popular draw for the next 5 years.
Invited to important events and often interviewed by newspapers, she was admired by both blacks and whites. She primarily flew the Curtiss JN-4 Jenny biplanes and other aircraft which had been Army surplus aircraft left over from the war. She made her first appearance in an American air show September 3rd, 1922, at an event honoring veterans of the all-black 369th Infantry Regiment of World War I, held at Curtiss Field in Long Island near New York City and sponsored by her friend Abbott and the Chicago Defender newspaper. The show billed Coleman as the world's greatest woman flyer and featured aerial displays by 8 other American ace pilots and a jump by black parachutist Hubert Julian.
6 weeks later, she returned to Chicago to deliver a stunning demonstration of daredevil maneuvers, including figure eights, loops, and near-ground dips to a large and enthusiastic crowd at the Checkerboard Aerodrome, now the grounds of Hines Veterans Administration Medical Center, Hines, Illinois, Loyola Hospital, Maywood, and nearby Cook County Forest Preserve. The thrill of stunt flying and the admiration of cheering crowds were only part of Coleman's dream. Coleman never lost sight of her childhood vow to one day amount to something. As a professional aviator, Coleman would often be criticized by the press for her opportunistic nature and the flamboyant style she brought to her exhibition flying.
She also quickly gained a reputation as a skilled and daring pilot who would stop at nothing to complete a difficult stunt. In Los Angeles, she broke a leg and 3 ribs when her plane stalled and crashed on February 22, 1923.
Committed to promoting aviation and combating racism, Coleman spoke to audiences across the country about the pursuit of aviation and goals for African Americans. She absolutely refused to participate in aviation events that prohibited the attendance of African Americans. In the 1920s, she met Reverend Hezekiah Hill and his wife, Viola, on a speaking tour in Orlando, Florida, a community activist who invited her to stay with them at the parsonage of Mount Zion Missionary Baptist Church on Washington Street in the neighborhood of Paramore. A local street was later named Bessie Coleman Street in her honor in the year 2013. The Hill family, who treated her as a daughter, persuaded her to stay in Florida, where Coleman opened a beauty shop in Orlando to earn extra money in an effort to buy her own airplane.
Through her media contacts, she was offered a role in a feature-length film titled Shadow and Sunshine, to be financed by the African-American Seminole Film Producing Company. She gladly accepted, hoping the publicity would help her to advance her career and provide her with some of the money she needed to establish her own flying school. But upon learning that the first scene in the movie required her to appear in tattered clothes with a walking stick and a pack on her back, she refused to proceed.
Opportunist though she was about her career, she was never an opportunist about race. She had no intention of perpetuating the derogatory image most whites had of most blacks, wrote Doris Rich, author of Queen Bess, Daredevil Aviator. Mae Jemison, the first African-American woman astronaut, said, "It's tempting to draw parallels between me and Miss Coleman, but I point to Bessie Coleman and say here is a woman, a being who exemplifies and serves as a model for all humanity, the very definition of strength, dignity, courage, integrity, and beauty."
Coleman would not live long enough to establish a school for young black aviators, but her pioneering achievements served as an inspiration for a generation of African American men and women. Because of Bessie Coleman, wrote Lieutenant William J. Powell in Black Wings 1934, which was dedicated to Coleman, we have overcome that which was worse than racial barriers. We have overcome the barriers within ourselves and dared to dream. Lieutenant Powell served in a segregated unit during World War I and tirelessly promoted the cause of Black aviation through his book, his journals, and the Bessie Coleman Aero Club, which he founded in 1929.
In April of 1926, she purchased a Curtiss JN-4, a Jenny, in Dallas, Texas. Her mechanic and publicity agent, 24-year-old William Willis, flew the plane from Dallas in preparation for an air show and had to make 3 forced landings along the way because the plane had been so poorly maintained. Upon learning this, Coleman's friends and family did not consider the aircraft safe and implored her not to fly it. On takeoff, Willis was flying the plane with Coleman in the other seat. She had not put on her seat belt because she was planning a parachute jump for the next day and wanted to look over the cockpit sill to examine the terrain.
About 10 minutes into the flight, the plane unexpectedly went into a dive and then a spin at 3,000 feet above the ground. Coleman was thrown from the plane at 2,000 feet and died instantly when she hit the ground. William Willis was unable to regain control of the plane and it plummeted to the ground. Willis died upon impact and the plane exploded and burst into flames. Although the wreckage of the plane was badly burned, it was later discovered that a wrench used to service the engine had been jammed into the flight controls. Coleman was 34 years old.
Funeral services were held in Florida before her body was sent back to Chicago. While there was little mention in most media, news of her death was widely carried in the African American press, and 10,000 mourners attended her ceremonies in Chicago, which were led by activist Ida B. Wells. What an inspiration. I'm really glad that we decided to do this on Bessie. I have been kind of asking other pilots that I've been flying with, do you know who Bessie is? Bessie Coleman? I'm going to do a piece on her for my podcast. And I was surprised how many pilots were like, yeah, she was like one of the first women, right? And I didn't know this. I kind of felt ashamed that here I am in aviation for so many decades doing this, and I had never known this. I knew the greats, the cliches out there, the names that we all recognize, but there are so many aviators out there that were absolute pioneers. You know, I often say that we're here, recording a podcast for fun about aviation, about the journey of today's aviator and how they're handling the hurdles of today's marketplace. And yet there's so much I don't know about our past, about the aviators that I am here standing on the shoulders of, because they paved their way, as Rob mentioned earlier, in blood. So I'm really happy that we got a chance to do this. What did you guys think?
That was awesome, man.
Yeah, it's an interesting article. Absolutely. Yeah. And like I was saying earlier when we were talking about this, I'd say I would fall into that category of people who have heard of her. Like I knew the name and I knew she was associated with the old air shows and the biplanes and things of that nature right there. But that's really about the extent of what I know.
Yeah.
Yes. Same here. I've heard of the name, but I couldn't tell you anything about her, and it was really, really, really good to finally read something about her and really put a context to her name and her contribution to aviation. It's pretty amazing.
Just all the barriers that she broke, being female and African American. Not just
and Native American too.
But two plus the Native American background as well.
Yeah,
and it's crazy to think that to this day there's still barriers being broken, by not only Native American, African Americans or whatever, by female pilots too. It's just the other day, I think an all-female air crew flew an airplane out of some Muslim country.
Air India. All female crew. Yeah.
All
I remember
female.
reading about that. That was pretty cool on
you know,
their longest flight that they do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really, you know, especially being a father to, you know, 2 young girls, you know, it's these women are role models, you know, so it's awesome that they're still out there, you know, making it happen. So it's cool.
Yeah. And the quote there from the first Black female astronaut, was it Mae Jensen, the first African-American woman astronaut, when she said that it's tempting to draw parallels between me and Miss Coleman, but I point to Bessie Coleman and say, here is a woman, a being who exemplifies and serves as a model for all humanity, the very definition of strength, dignity, courage, integrity, and beauty. I mean, wow. I mean, I would awesome. Like to see if that is on video somewhere, so I can see that speech from Mae Jemison. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, rock on.
But thank you, gentlemen. You know, today's show's been great. It was kind of a last minute thing for me because we were debating whether to do it, but then we thought, okay, let's, no matter what happens, whether Anthony can join us on the show or not, let's just record something. And on this layover, it's a longer layover for me, so I have the privilege of setting up, having good strong Wi-Fi here at the hotel and getting it going. And I was sending videos to you guys via text messages before the show that I've learned how to mirror, basically make a 2-screen laptop here with my EFB by using this air screen or whatever they're calling it, screen mirroring. So I have like 2 screens here that are being used for my laptop with no wires. It's really cool. So yeah, we had a great show. Really had a good time having this debate about both the vaccine and the new Warren letters and everything that's going on with our economy and the Congress and the politics of aviation. I mean, for some people it's a bit of a minutia of having to talk about it, but it affects us. We should know about it. And whether you're a senior pilot or you're a new hire that's maybe possibly affected by all this, it's important to kind of get a perspective on what's going on in our industry.
Yeah. It's definitely, it's something that, you know, if you're looking to get in the industry, if you're out there working on your ratings, plugging away, trying to get on with an airline, it's something that, you know, unfortunately, it's a reality of our profession. It's a cyclical nature. We talked about it time and time again in numerous podcasts. We have our highs, we have our lows, and unfortunately, no pun intended. And unfortunately, we are on the low side of this, and it feels like, and I hope you guys would agree with me, it feels like we're starting to come out the other end. And it could only, and it always has, it's always gotten better. So,
2 steps forward, 1 step back. I think that's really what it's been feeling like lately. But, you know, and I want to give Anthony an opportunity to talk again, just briefly, about his new adventure in YouTube and social media with Life by Z. Again, where can our listeners find you?
Like I said, basically on Facebook as well as Instagram under the title Life by Z, but most notably at the flagship new website, lifebyz.com. And it's a personal consulting business. So anybody out there that feels they could use some personal consulting, personal coaching, you know, things like how to win the day, how to develop good habits, how to set goals, how to stay on point. Just basically, you know, just how to take control of your life and breed a culture of success, or as I like to say, build a winning culture in life. That's what the website's all about, personal consulting. And that's what I'm going to be doing. And real quickly, if I can wrap up on something that Rob said, actually, this is something that I stated on, or sort of touching on something that Rob said. And this is something that I stated on another podcast that I went on that is yet to air. The airline industry finds a way. You know, it's kind of like Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park, you know, nature will find a way. The airline industry finds a way. It's what this industry has been doing since it started. It's had its back up against the wall on many occasions. This is not going to be the last time that this industry is going to face this. but it finds a way. Like I said, that poster over my shoulder may have to be reworked. All those companies up there could be merged into one. Who knows how this is going to play out? And I think we're likely to still see some mergers coming down the road. But for aspiring aviators out there, don't let it discourage you. This is just the cyclical nature of this business. It's what this industry does, and it'll still be there. And for anybody out there that's interested in any things I talked about, find me on Instagram under Life by Z, and otherwise you can touch base with me on lifebyz.com.
Awesome.
So before we go, can I ask a question? If you were an aviator, or if you were a aspiring aviator looking to get into the industry, and we told you that this kind of stuff was going to happen, and you had to put all this hard work into, your training and experiences to get to this point, would you still do it? Would you say it's worth it?
Oh, absolutely.
Me too. Yep.
I would also.
Yeah.
And I think that part of the reason for that is that you have to love flying. You have to want to do it. You can't be getting into flying because somebody told you were going to make lots of money, or because, the chicks were going to dig it, or something other than the fact that you loved flying, because that's what's going to differentiate between whether the people that would say or will say that, yes, it's worth it, or no, not so much.
Yeah. I got to tell you, with everything that's going on, and even though we do have, light conversation about this in the cockpit, when I go to work, and as soon as, before start checklist, boom, it is the coolest job in the world. As soon as those engines spool up and you launch off that runway and you're headed out somewhere, it's the coolest job in the world. And you pretty much forget about everything that's happening: COVID, government, life, home, oil change, car tire, whatever. You just go out there and you have fun. And that's what makes this job so cool, in my opinion.
Very well said. Yeah, very true. And I can't tell you how many questions I've been asked probably in the last 30 days by captains that I've flown with about, tell me about your podcast. Would you tell a young person that they should get into aviation? Because I've had quite a few people that ask me that they're getting ready to graduate from high school or college, and they're thinking about changing direction and going into the airline industry or a pilot industry. What would you tell them? And the conversations start, and next thing you know, it's like 3 days of the trip, and you're still talking about the debate. Should you get started or should you not? And then, I simply tell them this. I'm like, somebody comes up to me and says their kid's interested in flying. Can you talk to them? I say, sure, I'll talk to them. And, I have them call me, and I usually tell them, why do you want to do this? What? Oh, I think it's cool. All right, why do you think it's cool? Oh, just because, you guys get to, fly airplanes and make a lot of money. I'm like, no, aviation's not for you. Don't do it. And then they call me and they're like, you told them not to do it? I'm like, yep, I did. I told them not to do it. I know it seems harsh, but and here's my logic. And don't tell them I said this. And then usually it's like, if I tell you no, don't do it because I don't feel your heart's in it, you're just going to be in a world of hurt. You're going to get in a lot of debt, and it might be not something you'll really have a passion for. And when the kid calls me back and goes, yeah, but I really am thinking, I'm like, well, I don't think you should do it. I think it's too hard. This is what you can expect. You're going to be gone. You're going to be away from your family. You're going to have, when you get home, your wife and kids are going to always be constantly going, well, you didn't spend time with us, and give me some money and all this stuff. And you paint this really negative picture. And then after a couple of weeks, they still are calling you going, but I still want to do it. What flight school should I go to? Then you're like, oh, okay. You're persistent. You obviously, and here's how you start out. You start out small, get your private pilot license, go to a Part 61 school, pay as you go, don't break the bank, don't sign on the dotted line. And if you still like it after learning the beginning entry positions of flight instruction, and you really feel that you have a passion for it, and you get bit by the aviation bug, then call me back and we'll see what my opinion is of what might work best for you, what strategy, what flight school, what training regimen might work for you. So it really is a way to kind of weed out those, like Anthony was saying earlier, is like those that just are doing it for the money. It's not for you, because this, like what Rob asked, is would you still do it if knowing all this? And the answer has to be yes, because if it's like, nah, I'm gonna go be an electrician. Okay, go. Don't wait.
Cool.
Go do something else.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yep.
Well, gentlemen, thank you
man.
so much. As all of us here are hoping on the Squawk Ident Podcast, is that you're enjoying yourself. You're enjoying the show. And if you find value in our podcast, we would like to ask you to help us grow by visiting our website at aviatortony.com. That's Alpha Victor, the number 8, Romeo Tango, Oscar November Yankee.com. From there on the homepage, you can scroll down and find methods to contribute to the podcast by becoming a producer. You'll find links to our YouTube channel and our other social media links as well. You can leave us feedback from the Contact Us page, either audio feedback or an email describing whether you like the show, what you want to hear more of, or even if you didn't like something that we said. We'd love to have a conversation about it. Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube users can also find us under the Squawk Ident Podcast search. We encourage you to support us on the YouTube channel with a like, subscribe, and a share. And don't forget to check out Life by Z and lifebyz.com. In closing, I'd like to say thank you for taking the time to listen to these grateful aviators. Keep the dirty side down out there, be safe, and take care of each other. Bye, everyone.
See ya.
Take care. Be healthy.